I'd like to inform everybody that the workshop is being recorded and that the recording will be available for future viewing on our YouTube web channel. And so with that, I'd like to thank you and for joining us again this morning for our webinar on working in BART's active transit environment. I'm Harry Overstreet II, your BART Small Business Support Services Post-Award Project Administrator. It's a mouthful. So this webinar, again, is being recorded and will be available for future viewing on our newly established YouTube channel. I'd like to take a second and cover some of our online webinar guidelines. So please take a moment and, of course, mute yourself when not speaking. Be mindful of the background noises. Try and limit distractions and, of course, avoid multitasking to get the most out of today's webinar. Here's some general information about our pre-award and post-award programs. We have a really great pre-award program whose mission is to help you identify, prepare for, and obtain BART construction contracts as a general or subcontractor. Additionally, with that, our pre-award project administrator has joined us. I'm glad to say that Paul Pendergast is with us. And if he's here for the whole time, may be available for some questions. Additionally, our post-award program is designed to help you successfully complete your BART construction projects with the goal of you returning to pursue more BART work. With that, we'll move on and introduce the presenters, or they'll introduce themselves.
Okay, thank you, Harry, since I seem to be first on the board here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm happy to be here and help guide you through some of the experiences that we've had and challenges working on BART contracts. My name is Luis Paez. I am a senior project manager, resident engineer with the Allen Group, and have about 10 years experience working on BART contracts as on the CM side. Prior to that, I had multiple years working on the contractor side on BART contracts, and probably another 25 years in the industry serving other public works clients and contracts. And I'm happy to be here. Turn it over to Nick Houchin here.
Hi, Nick Houchin, a Director of Operations at the Allen Group and part of the SBSS team. And I've been able to work on BART projects for the last 10 years from construction management side, from the different roles, OE up to RE inspector. So I've been able to get a breadth of experience and hope to help share some of the knowledge that I've learned from working at BART to help you guys out. Look forward to talking to you today.
Next slide. Okay. Very good. So this is our agenda for the day. Our section 1 will provide you some information regarding advance and timely preparation you can do on the contractor side prior to NTP, your notice to proceed. It again starts the clock ticking on your contract with the district, and that's a whole other subject matter, but we'll get into that later. Understanding your contract documents is critical for any contractor and any project. Really knowing your deliverables and the rules and regulations and constraints that you have to provide them under is very important. 011-1100 of these specifications is the summary of work for your project, and it provides a lot of detailed information relating to the constraints and really important notes regarding the work that you have to perform, deliver, liquidated damages that may exist if you exceed your time, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go over that in more detail as we move forward. Section 2 will get more into issues such as the BART operating envelope, understanding it, definitions and explanations, understanding the detailed SSWP, site-specific work plan submittal and requirements, understanding the operating system access, moving into BART operating rules and procedures, And finally, the BART safety rules and regulations, which are critical to the safe performance of work in the district. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Harry. That is section 1, knowing your contract. This is a placeholder. We'll move on and keep moving forward. Okay, so thank you again, Harry, and welcome to all attendees. And I just want to state that, excuse me, although this workshop's focus is to provide you with recommendations and specific information for working in an active transit environment, it's really essential to note that knowing your contract documents and proper planning to achieve your project deliverables is vital to the success of your firm as either a general contractor or subcontractor. I'm sorry if you can't hear me well. I may have a little frog in my throat here. Hopefully you can. So again, really, that's vital to the success of your firm. So as a GC, general contractor, a strong relationship and communication with your BART assigned resident engineer is also critical, right? You need to know them, get to know them early, communicate often, take their guidance because they're accustomed to working on different types of projects. They're going to help guide you to be successful. It's very important.
So much coming at me.
Okay, so again, moving into this next portion here, assigning key personnel and resources. Your contract will require early submittal of resumes for your project manager, your scheduler, quality manager, and health and safety representative. So again, having these folks already identified internally, ready to be presented, right, is going to be key to getting a running start at the beginning of your project. And the scheduler is a really important part because BART is kind of finicky with the schedules and there's a lot of detail and required to it, and we'll move into that later point, but I just want to mention that to you. Coordinating effectively is the last portion, step 3 is noted here. Really advanced planning internally and externally, early and ongoing communications with your BART assigned RE will be critical, and they'll help guide you through any potential impacts to the BART operating system from your work and work of others that are around you, because there's other contractors that are going to be working around you at the same time as you, right? So these are things you're not aware of when you're planning for your work, but if you have somebody right next to you doing other track work or something like that, you know, all of this has to come together to flow and be safely performed. So let's move to the next slide, Harry. Right. Again, reviewing and understanding your contract documents. Planning in advance for the timely performance of the project scope, right? So again, it's so critical to have very detailed and advanced planning for the interest of a successful project, right? Understanding your contract documents and requirements that are sensitive to the nature of project completion, and again, avoidance of delays to the performance of your work that may kick in liquidated damages at some point. You know, BART is not punitive about those, but they are always there to motivate you to get your work done in the manner and the time that was allotted in the contract document. So again, you know, there's things that happen during the performance of a project that may impact that, right? There's gray lines. Some things are may delay you that are district owned or unforeseen conditions, and just being really careful with your documentation, always protecting your interests and documenting delays and impacts are really highly critical. Reviewing the constraints related to working in the BART active environment, right? So there are many issues related to working in the BART active environment. Now, what is that? That can be work in the stations, in certain sensitive areas of the stations, right? Also within the track areas, which may require you to work during the blanket, which is when BART doesn't run trains, I think 1:30 to 4:30 in the morning. So All of this takes a lot of planning and execution and coordination with BART and different departments within BART. So last one is understanding the system access request process and how to obtain BART support, right? We'll be talking more about the system access request committee that BART assigns specialists to each individual scope or discipline that are there to review your plan to work in the BART system, right? And this is done on a weekly basis. There's a system access request that has to be submitted that's tied directly into the SSWP that have to be approved prior to that, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward here. Let's go to the next slide, Harry. All right. So again, jumping into the 01-1100 summary of work that exists in every BART contract specifications requirements, right? And, so what is needed to complete deliverables within specified contract durations, right? Again, preparing early, coordinating, having your submittals done, early submittals, moving forward proactively and aggressively to meet all the deadlines and milestones related to the performance of your work. Now, every contract at BART is different. So again, there's no one formula, but working with your RE is going to help you be successful. As we know, time is of the essence, okay? Understanding potential impact to BART operations and work that must be performed during the blanket and identifying BART's necessary support from BART, right? Really understanding how your work could potentially impact BART operations and what must be done to avoid impacts is extremely important to your success, to avoiding unnecessary delays, to potentially having your work stopped by BART because there was not enough planning, not enough coordination with stakeholders, with liaisons. There's so many departments that can, really shut you down if you're not working in a safe and effective and very planned manner. And again, BART could assess LDs if your work impacts BART's revenue service. Now, these are LDs that are separate from those related to completion of your work in the contract duration, right? This is if you shut down the lights to the station, right? If you stop trains from operating for some reason, your work impacts that. The fines are extremely high and they're per hour. I won't get into what those cost, but you can look in your summary of work if you have a project you're looking at or dealing with now. Bullet point 3, best practices are essential, right? Especially for working in an occupied environment. And what are best practices, right? They're defined as standard and planned practices followed in the construction industry that will guarantee optimal outcome and profit, right? These practices could be policy, procedure, or a complete system implemented at a given period of time. It sounds kind of fancy, but for most cases, it's really what's most important to assure safety and that the work is done with excellence and on time, right, is really important. So there's no one formula, but safety first is the most important thing at BART and in the construction industry. Proper planning, communication, and adherence to policies and procedures that govern your ability to work in and around the track zone or sensitive areas of the BART operating system. And we'll move forward and talk more about that in future slides. And closing this one up, bullet point 4, what are common challenges and how to overcome them, right? If you're new to BART, a common misconception is that BART is not difficult to navigate and that ordinary construction planning may be utilized by you or your forces for other public works projects could be simply applied to BART. I don't recommend you make those assumptions, right? It's really not the case. The district has very specific rules and procedures that are not applicable elsewhere. So understanding these rules and procedures as they apply to your work and then planning and communicating effectively for performance of your work is key. Okay, next slide, Harry. Talked enough about that one.
And
Section 2, this is for Nick, operating
yeah,
system.
I can take over now. Thanks,
Yes, sir.
Luis.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk more about, like, I know Luis has mentioned about the BART specific items, and then I'm going to talk more about what some of those things are that make BART unique to work in. And a good way to start is kind of go over some key words and phrases or definitions for those phrases, just to bring you up to speed that are kind of specific to BART. BART will often talk about, we're calling this working and operating environment. Well, BART's operating area is basically any portion of the BART system where they control access to it. So it's not just, track work. You're talking about if you're within an electrical rooms, you're in the train control rooms, you're in fan and transition structures, or the stations. So it really covers most of the areas where you would be doing work. And then if you get more specific, when you get into like the right-of-way BART, that's really the fenced off secured areas. Typically, that's normally the trackways or the yards. And then when we talk about, getting access to BART, you'll often hear people mention the words SSWP or EIC or watch person. What those phrases are is SSWP is the site-specific work plan. That's what your plan you have to put together and get approved by BART to actually show that you can do your work safely. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. And the EIC is really, this is an important one to know, is that's the employee in charge. Basically, BART will assign a BART representative, a BART employee that will act as the EIC. And they are really the one that calls the shots when you're within. They're the one in charge when it comes to working in the right of way. So they will call in the work orders with BART to get you into access in, and they will also close down the work with BART. They'll call BART and let know the work is, done and you're able to clear. So they're really the one in charge of making sure your work as the contractor or subcontractor is done safely and that you're able to return BART to revenue service unharmed and come back out. So you'll hear those words used a lot. Luis already talked about like knowing the revenue hours. That's critical. Making sure you actually understand, is your work revenue during the day where they're running trains, or is it supposed to happen during non-revenue hours? Because that can greatly change what work windows you actually have to do to work in. So maybe you only have 3-hour shifts during the blanket, or maybe you can get, longer shifts during the weekends, or you can work during the day while they're still running trains. That's a critical item to really look into in your contract and understand. And then the last one I'll get into more is their safety procedures. You'll hear the term RWP used, and that's roadway worker program they have. So it's a safety training they have, the RWP training. You can go to the next slide, Harry. So SSWP is really one of the most critical items when it comes to working at BART in the operating envelope. So BART has a specific template that every contract has to fill out. And you can get this template from your RE. They should be providing it to you. But basically, it's a set plan that has, set sections that go through your workforce, your equipment you're going to use, a step-by-step plan for how you're going to actually do your work. And that plan can vary depending on the severity of impact to BART. So if you're just working within a station and running conduit, the details of your plan might be very different than, say I've done a project where we actually shut down the main line to BART and had for 72 hours to replace rail and install a crossover. We had to have a schedule that was every 15 minutes. That was how detailed the schedule had to be, because that's how critical the risk was for, if you don't get the main line back in service, you're impacting BART's revenue. So the detail of the plan can vary depending on your scope, but really the bread and butter is that this plan will communicate to BART that you have a specific plan to get the work done safely, that you know exactly how you're going to go about doing the work, what equipment you're going to use, how you're going to get it into the area you're working, mobilizing, unmobilizing, how you're going to keep the area safe, not only for your workers, but for the patrons around you if you're in the station. And the key is you have to get this SSWP approved before you can start work. And the way the process works is you will submit this to your RE. Your RE will be the first person to review it. They then put this into a portal within BART, and it goes to up to 10 to 15 key stakeholders within BART that all have to sign off on your plan. And each stakeholder, if one of those stakeholders has comments and doesn't find your SSWP acceptable, it won't be approved. Every single person has to approve it. So you have to have that in mind when you're putting this together, that there's a lot of different parties at BART that all have
Sorry, folks, I think Nick froze up here. Nick, if you can hear us, your signal has frozen. All right. Shall we continue, Harry? That's apologies, everyone. Let's jump into the next slide, perhaps.
Okay. Sure.
Apologies for that.
Was
Okay, sorry about that, Nick. If you can hear us, we'll get you back on in a moment. So, all right. So the operating system access, and everything Nick is talking about is closely tied to what I'm going to be discussing here as well. And just a quick note here. I see a hand up. We'll take questions at the end. Apologies for that. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Can you hear me, Harry?
yes, I can.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. So jumping into understanding the access to the BART operating system, right? So as I've mentioned before, there's a multitude of projects at BART, different potential issues that may impact your access to the operating system, right? So access is dependent on the type of work you are performing, when you're performing it, and the potential impact of the BART operating system, right? So oftentimes contractors are unaware that work which may impact the BART operating system may require additional documentation to satisfy BART's requirements for an IOP, internal operating procedure. This additional documentation and coordination is required. This is over and above a site-specific work plan and to support your system access request process, and may take weeks to get reviewed and approved, again, depending on the level of potential impact to the BART operating system, to trains, to stations, etc. So this will be something you'll come up with a list of and work with your RE and ops liaisons potentially to satisfy, right? Many people think that sometimes an IOP is only needed if you'll be doing single tracking or a shutdown or major road trackway work, but there are a lot of things that fall under the impact to BART ops umbrella that could surprise folks, right? So here are a few examples of potential impact, right, that if left in place during revenue service would require an IOP. Installing a temporary bypass on a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. There are portions of the BART system that require uninterruptible power, right? And if you are working on anything that could impact that, you have to install a temporary bypass, which is a very complicated and detailed procedure that you have to go through with BART to satisfy their requirements. Decommissioning a fire alarm or suppression system without immediately commissioning another, right? BART fire and life safety has many requirements. They have to also satisfy local jurisdiction requirements. If you're in San Francisco, SF Fire Department, they have, they can walk into any area at any time and demand whatever they think is in the interest of life safety. So there's a relationship there that has to be maintained and respected, and those are the things that you'll understand as you work with your RE. Potentially taking an entrance out of service, right? If you take a BART entrance out of service, I can tell you from my own experience, I'm RE for Market Street Canopies project right now. You take one of those entrances out of service, you have to make sure that that's coordinated with operations, with transportation, with the different groups that have to approve that entrance being out of service because there's minimum requirements for access and egress to the stations, especially busy stations. So there's more to it, but that's our keynotes there, right? Early outs is another thing, which is your ability to maybe change BART's schedule for certain elements of the work and elements of their service, or taking a maintenance of way out of service. And I won't get into that. That's a little bit too much right now, but those are some examples. So again, BART suggested best practice, right? When I check with operations, they say, look, really simply, is to take some time at the beginning of a project and try to think of any and all ways that your work could impact the operation of trains and patron movement. Once you have that list, right, you've developed that list, BART can help the project team narrow down what does and doesn't need to be in an IOP or special planning so that everything is ready to go by the time you get to that section of your work. Again, you don't want delays. Delays bring up a lot of impacts to BART and to yourself, and they certainly do affect your profitability, right? Effective and timely coordination and communication are essential. So operating system access delays, just getting into this real quickly, every BART project provides an allowance that allows payment to be made to the contractor or subcontractor for operating system access delays, right? These delays are defined as the district's inability to provide support to the contractor for planned and approved work per the system access request, right? When the support is canceled at the last minute and forces are on site to complete work and unable to do its work due to district initiated impacts, then the contractor can request a change order to pay for the lost or wasted time for the entire crew. This has happened to me multiple times. You go out with a crew at night to do work during the blanket. You don't have an EIC, you don't have the electrical support that you were told you'd have, and the work has to stop and the contractor has to go home with their crew. So this is a way that you get paid for that lost time. Work in and outside the BART operating envelope is, pretty much any work that's on the street, in parking lots, that's considered outside of the BART operating envelope is advisory work. It's much less scrutiny from system access requests, but it does require typically a global SSWP, and I think maybe Nick can talk more about that as we move forward. Working inside the BART operating envelope can be defined as work near the trackway, tunnels, yards, train control rooms, or electrical rooms. And I'm sure there are a few other locations. And I think we can move to the next slide now. Sorry about that. Okay. BART operating rules and procedures. All right. Understanding the roadway worker protection program is essential to understanding why BART has operating rules and procedures, right? There have been loss of life in the past, many years ago. Maybe Nick has more specificity on that. I know he recently went through his RWP update, but this is a reason why BART is so stringent, and this was mandated by the state as well, to mitigate or never repeat any loss of life that happened previously due to lax procedures, right? That's one reason BART is so stringent on safety and having solid procedures to guarantee it at all times, right? Interpretation of operating rules and procedures is a role of the operations liaison in the interpretation of the SAR process, system access request. So some things may be borderline as to whether you'll impact or whether you won't. The people that make that determination is the ops liaison. It's not even your BART RE, right? They have to work with ops to make sure that your work is compliant to the operating rules and procedures. Some of BART's emergency response procedures, key aspects are third rail probing procedure, safety tagging procedures, electrical safe clearance, physical safe clearance, etc. We won't get into those here. If you have any questions at the end, we can address them. Some of the requirements for working near existing BART utilities and facilities also have category work that's specific to the location and type of impact that your work could provide to BART, right? So we won't get into that either. I think this is more specific to questions you may have if you have a project that requires that. And finally, just the return to service checklist. This is a final checklist that's only required if you have equipment that you're potentially impacting at BART. Let's say you're working on an electrical panel to replace it, to make it larger, and it impacts that electrical panel feeds station critical equipment, right? So they require what's called a return to service checklist to make sure that you've done all the major and critical items needed to get that asset back into service in a timely manner. I guess that's a real general description of it, but it's adequate. Okay, so jumping into safety and security, Harry.
All right.
That's Nick.
My,
All right.
my computer is functional now, fortunately. Sorry about that, everyone. Of course it would crash right now. But yeah, so I mean, going to safety and security, obviously that's like really the most important item when we're putting these plans together, especially from BART's perspective. We talked about the RWP certification process, and that's a full week class that anyone that's going to be working within the right of way has to go through. They have to become RWP trained and certified. And so this is the same certification that BART's own employees and own workers and crews take. So it's the same class for everyone. A key thing to know, though, is in order for you to get registered for this class and take it, you have to get your badge. You have to get badged. So as a contractor and sub, you should be trying to focus on getting your key personnel badged as soon as you can, because I've seen in the badging process when people are going through background checks, things can get delayed and then they can't get registered for the class because they don't have a permanent badge. And that can cause issues with, getting your crews certified and able to go. So you'll see people, they have a little orange sticker on their card and that means they passed the class, but it's a key process to know as someone that's going into BART work for the first time that you're going to have to get through that to be able to work in the right of way and within these areas. The other part that you really need to focus on when you're creating your plans is public safety. That's going to be a big aspect. It's not just the safety of your workers and BART's revenue. It's also, you could be working in stations or parking lots, areas that interact with the public. And you can easily be required to build, solid barricades made out of, fire retardant plywood. There could be some extensive requirements for you to really have a safe area that BART feels comfortable with. So it's understanding how your work is going to interact with the public and trying to build out a good plan for safety with the public as well. And then, the same way that you would typically go through, creating a JHA or creating some specific job hazard analysis, BART has their own processes that they do, especially when you're going into the right of way. You're going to have to go through safety procedures and safety checklists every time. And that's something you're going to have to be used to. I will just say that, this is really, when people are reviewing your SSWPs, their priority, those stakeholders, and there's something I was going to mention, is their priority is ensuring that the work is going to be safe and there's not going to be interruptions to revenue. And they're reviewing, 15, 20 SSWPs. There's multiple contractors trying to work in the same areas at the same time. And so you kind of have to understand that, like, BART has this big global picture of their whole system, and your project, while it's very important, is part of, like, they're trying to fit your project into while not impacting their main service, which is providing transit to the Bay Area. So that's really where their focus is. So a lot of times it's good to put yourself in their shoes and think about it from their side when you're putting your plans together of how BART would think about what would be the best for them. And you can go to the next slide, Ari. And just in general, I think it's good to illustrate some of these items we're talking about with real world examples. And I know we've mentioned a lot of times, advanced planning, but like, what does that actually look like out in the field? So an example that, Luis and I have done on a project we've had in the past is we brought in, since we've had experience doing this multiple times, we understood what in the SSWP, there's key BART stakeholders that are going to review that SSWP and have to approve it, whether it's the electrical group, the mechanical group, comm group, transportation, safety, there's a whole bevy of people. So we actually organized a field walk with the contractor and all those stakeholders and the designer to all be within, because what we were doing is we were installing conduit and electrical and comm systems throughout all the stations in the downtown San Francisco, which are super highly visible, high priority stations for BART. It's like their highest revenue generating station. So there's a lot of eyes on this, and there's a lot of people really making sure we're doing this right. So we were able to get everyone there and basically had the contractor walk all these people through where all their work was taking place, what they were going to do, what their plan was. And what this allowed is the stakeholders were able just to ask questions directly to the contractor, and with our designer there, they're able to, instead of having to issue a bunch of RFIs, the contractor was able to ask questions directly to the designer that would have to have input from those BART stakeholders anyways. So they were all there together. And what it allowed is, so when the contractor actually submitted their SSWP and we put it in the portal, the stakeholders were able to approve it much faster than if we would have just taken this plan and cold turkey, just thrown it into the portal and had all these reviewers just see it. So really, like, if you're a contractor on a job, I would recommend you just requesting something like this from your RE, saying like, I would like to have a walk with all the stakeholders. I'd like to get them all here and look at my plan and just hash it out, because that's a way to reduce that cycling of reviews of, getting 3, 4, 5 revisions of an SSWP. So I highly recommend doing that. And then example of how like easily something can go wrong with planning is, example we had is the contractor hadn't really fully figured out their routing plan when they were doing the work. And so they thought, and without really doing a thorough analysis, that they could route around the train control room and go into the electrical room they were trying to reach. But while they're out there, they realized they'd made a mistake in their routing, and that actually the only way they were going to make it into that electrical room is to go through the train control room and core through the walls there and then run their conduits to the electrical room. The issue is that the train control room is one of those high security items at BART. So you can't work there during the day most of the time. You have to work nights. You have to go add that work now back into the SSWP. So we had to amend the SSWP. We then had to submit system access requests, which are for at least a week and a half out. So at the end of the day, we ended up having almost like over a month delay to the project just because of one mistake of not realizing that the conduit had to go through the train control room while they were creating their SSWP. So it just illustrates how easily, how well you really have to go through and think about these things. Because if you get out there in the field and you miss it, it can end up being a month, 2-month delay for one conduit.
Sure.
As a tough lesson learned. But yeah. So, and
good points.
Those are two good examples I had.
Yeah. And, I'd like to throw another one in there actually, because look, there's a lot of complexity to work in these stations. And when you're an electrician trying to route conduit through the spaghetti that's already in there, right? There's so much in these stations already. And you think you're just going from point A to point Z, and it's going to be an easy process, right? You've got your crews out there, slap it in. You had done your shop drawings indicating your routing, and typically people don't think about the routing in advance as to what the real circumstances are in the field, right? You can't just go off of plan. You have to look at the exact routing in the field. You may be trying to go through somebody else's raceway. When I say somebody else, it could be a raceway that's holding signal equipment that belongs to BARTCom. It could belong to another contract. It could belong to BART Electrical, and you have to get authority to penetrate that raceway to go through it, because you can't just go around it sometimes, right? So there's a lot of little nuances like that that it can impact your work. You have to go through an existing wall, a structural element, a wall that has rebar in it, has, it's concrete. You're going to have to scan that wall. You're going to have to prove to BART Structural that you're not going to hit any rebar. You're not going to hit any other assets that may be in the wall. So there's a lot of proof required, and these things take time and effort, right? So understanding this work ahead of time, you're going to need a core driller. You're going to need, people to manage this work that would ordinarily take, let's say, a day of work. It might take 4 or 5 because of all these requirements. So calculating that in your bid, it's a difficult thing, but it's important to understand ahead of time. Okay, so that kind of wraps up that section. And key takeaways. Okay. I don't know. Again, really, I can't say I don't know. Knowing your contract, right? I stated that early on is so important to your success, right? Getting to know the resources of BART, and that starts with your BART resident engineer, who will help you understand how your work impacts other departments, and getting to know the people in those departments that will help you be successful, because everyone at BART really does want to help you. But what we don't want is emergencies to have to deal with at the last minute because of poor planning or improper execution. So once you get to know them, they'll be very helpful, because you're going to help them succeed too and get out of their way, right? And actively communicating your plan very early. Talked about that. I don't think there's a need to mention that more, but knowing your plan and communicating early. So where are we at now? Nick, do you want to add anything else to this?
Yeah, I just want to add one more just kind of overall point. Is like I've seen a lot of different contractors come in and try to do this process, and I just highly recommend that you come into this, like, the planning, SSWP, getting into the field with a highly collaborative approach, because I've seen people come in and they think they can just bulldoze their way through, or like, this is how I do it. This is an unreasonable request you're making. I can't, like, this is going to cost me money. If you come into that process and you're really going to be like stuck in your ways, and you're going to push back on everything that BART's requesting or your RE is requesting from you, it's just going to drag out the process, and it's going to hurt everyone. And if you can come into it, you can still protect your rights and protect, doing the work in a efficient and, not a cost prohibitive way. But if you come into it, with a problem solving mindset of, here, I'm here to help, let's get creative, let's think of different ways to do this, then you're going to get a lot more of buy-in from the stakeholders and from your RE to really push this forward. So I think the mindset of going into this process is really important. And if you try to just, stick to your one rigid way and you won't change, it's just, I've seen that fail so many times, because BART has rigid rules and procedures, and they're not just going to change them for your one project. That, they're having to manage, dozens of projects at the same time, and that's why they have these rules in the first place. So they want to allow you to do your work efficiently, but they also need to make sure that they're doing it safe and that they're not going to impact their revenue. So that was just like an overarching kind of theme I've seen on a lot of the jobs I've been on.
Excellent point, Nick. And I think we're ready to move on to Harry here for the next slide.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I had to clear my throat. So first I want to before we get into the questions and answers, there are a couple of more workshops, webinars this month that are going to be really good and entertaining that our pre-award team and is putting together. So, and we're actually fortunate to have them with us this morning. Paul Pendergast and Michael Reyes are with us. But there'll be a bidding and estimating workshop on February 7th. And then there'll be a small business virtual drop-in where you can get some immediate response and answers and, a request for assistance. So that's upcoming. Any questions in regard to professional services? I just want to say quickly, because Fei Lu is our contact in BART's Office of Civil Rights, and he is available for any questions regarding professional services that you may have, and he is readily available. There's his his contact information. And of course, with that, we're happy to answer any questions. So we'll open up the floor. Anybody have any questions that we can answer? I know it was really informative.
I think someone has their hand up, Harry.
Are we
Yes.
going to receive? Are we going to receive these slides?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. If you reach out to us, we can send you a PDF of the presentation. Also, the entire workshop is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, this is Darlene Jones of Abundance Worldwide Enterprises. We're a trucking company, and
Yes.
I've been around the state of California going to various events. And in the transportation field, I'm being told that when we work on these railways and on these construction projects and particularly transit agencies, that we need another level of insurance especially for the rail to have the right of way to be out there. Is that true?
That could very well be true. That would be a question more for contracts, I think. And I can tell you though, if you're trucking into BART's operating system, you're going to need to have your truckers are going to need to be badged. They're going to need to have prior access established and coordinated in advance. But yes, the insurance aspect may very well be true. That's something we can try to find an answer for you. Again, small business support services. We have a pre-award side and post-award. I work with the post-award side mainly, but pre-award we have questions like this. Perhaps that's something Michael can look into. We can work on it together. But if you have questions, we're here to provide answers to the best of our ability and guidance. So reaching out to Harry with separate questions after the fact, you want to email him, we'd be happy to address those specifically for you.
Yeah. And
Thank
if I can,
you. And when you find out, can you tell me how much that is for BART? Like how much what is the insurance amount, the limit? That's
What
what
are
I
the limits?
really wanted to know.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Yes.
Yeah, we can definitely check that out. I mean, I know that some of the projects have the OSIP, the owner controlled insurance program, and then some don't. So I think it may depend upon the project, but we can reach out and find out what the requirements are through procurement.
That's correct. That's correct, Harry. Different types of projects, different requirements, but yes.
Right. And what are the name? What is it? What is the?
I'm sorry.
Once I see it, I can decide whether or not to bid on it. To even go down that road. You understand? I don't want to waste anybody's time.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I hear what you're saying. I hear your question. You want to try to know this in advance when you're bidding a project. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. Michael's on the line or Dondi. I don't know if you have any information to advise on that. This is more of a pre-award comment, I believe, or question.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing. I'm not sure if the volume is looking. Darlene, can you repeat that? Sorry.
And
Yes, since Mr. Harry titled it as an OSIP insurance, do you have like a list of contracts already that have been awarded that's a requirement for the trucking? And what are the insurance limits?
That would be project by project. Now I'd actually defer that to the insurance folks at BART, which we've done in the past. But I can get one of their insurance folks to respond to that accurately, if that helps, especially if it's project specific. I'd have to go to the past projects to see what it amounted to. And yeah, that's a little bit of an exercise, but we could get the information for you, Darlene.
Okay, I'll just put my email in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
And if I might add, Darlene, my contact information and Paul Prendergast is our pre-award administrator. Both of our contact information is on the slide at the end, so you can reach out to to the program, and that's for everybody. And any questions can be sent to myself, my email address, and again, pre-award questions can be directed to Paul Prendergast or Michael Reyes. But Paul's information is on here. So thank you. Any other questions?
If anybody has anything, they need to take mute off. Sometimes that happens to the best of us.
Yep, put your hand up,
That's right.
or if not, we've been online for an hour, and I guess we may be able to conclude our webinar. I don't want to cut anybody off. But in the world of construction, time is money.
Yeah, thank you, Harry.
So,
Thank you, everyone. Really, it's been a pleasure
Absolutely.
presenting.
Thank you for all for attending.
Yeah, on behalf of the Allen Group, on behalf of BART Small Business Support Services, we thank you for joining us this morning. Please, if you have any other additional questions, reach out to us. Let's see. We have. Sorry, there should be. Again, this is our slide with our contact information. I'm Harry Overstreet II. My contact information, Paul Prendergast is with us. It's his contact information. And for professional services, Fei Lu is the contact. And thank you again for joining us. And I guess we will be signing out from here.
Wish you much success.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for the information.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Have a good day.
Glad that all of you could join us this morning.
Happy Friday.
Yes.
Thank you.